We've got some exciting new updates for the release schedule of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Some details of the game's world featuring, quote, a high degree of freedom, and some news about the upcoming release of Final Fantasy XVI. That is making Square Enix a little nervous. Before we dive deeper into all the news, let me remind you that I am going to be giving away 2 copies of Final Fantasy XVI as part of this month's game giveaway. If you haven't already participated, go ahead and follow the link in the description or the pinned comment to access the event. Make sure to enter before the end of the day on June 19th so that I can contact the winners the following morning to send them their download codes. Also, please check your emails. If I haven't heard back from a winner within 48 hours, I will have another winner randomly selected, so keep your eyes on your email shortly after the giveaway ends. And with that, let's dive into this exciting Final Fantasy news. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the follow-up to Final Fantasy VII Remake, received its first trailer nearly a year ago, and since then, very little information has been disclosed about the game. When it comes to the game's release date, all the trailer gave us was an out next winter timeframe, which now points to late 2023 or early 2024. While we still do not have a release date for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just yet, we do have news from the Final Fantasy VII Twitter page that has updated fans about various aspects of the game. In a post by the producer, Yoshinori Kitase, he answers a question about the game's development progress, with, quote, development is progressing smoothly and according to plan. We are currently working on nailing down a release date for the game, end quote. Now, we may all come to different conclusions about this, but to me, it certainly looks like the game is definitely still on track for a winter release. If I were to nail down a guess as to when the game will release, I'm betting on early 2024 personally. Somewhere around February or March sounds about right for me, seeing as Final Fantasy VII Remake released in April of 2020, and thus its follow-up could certainly release around 4 years after that. That's just my hunch, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below about what you think the release date will be for this game. We'll return to the release date speculation later on in this video, but let's instead look at the other recent developer comments on the Final Fantasy VII Twitter page. In the second post released on Twitter on June 3rd, we got some news regarding how players will travel throughout the world outside of Midgar in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Here is what the game's director, Naoki Hamaguchi, had to say, with, quote, players will be able to journey across the wide and multifaceted world with a high degree of freedom, experiencing a myriad of different stories along the way, end quote. The bold lettering in the post containing high degree of freedom is quite interesting, and as always, let me know in the comments what you think this means, but I think the game's format is going to be most likely similar to the upcoming Final Fantasy XVI, in which the game is linear but has some open areas for players to explore and adventure off the beaten path, in more instanced areas rather than a complete open world. Because the original Final Fantasy VII sported a world map, as did many other classic JRPGs, I don't think that we are going to have something like that here in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Instead, something like a Final Fantasy XVI or Final Fantasy XII progression, where zones are instants, makes the most sense to me, giving players the opportunity to travel through highly detailed and carefully constructed zones that match the developer's artistic vision. This is the aspect that I am most excited to learn more about, because outside of Midgar, the game dramatically opens up, allowing the player to go explore off the map at their whim, although certain vehicles may prevent them from exploring too far. Here in the remake in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, an open world setting may prove too ambitious, and thus the quality of the open world and other aspects of the game may take a serious hit, considering how vast and varied all the environments and locations are. Let me know what you all think in the comments below regarding the world design of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Before we move on to the other news, it is worth talking about the timing of these Twitter announcements, as they are being revealed near days ahead of Summer Game Fest, in which it is possible that we may get further updates about the game. Square Enix will have some sort of presence at the event during Summer Game Fest held on June 8th. And on June 11th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, there will be a pre-launch celebration of Final Fantasy XVI that will also be streamed. Perhaps here we may get more information regarding the release date and other features coming to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but I don't know, fingers crossed. Regardless, I definitely recommend following Final Fantasy VII on Twitter, as there are many announcements pertaining to everything within the Final Fantasy VII universe, so check out those updates if you are looking forward to future announcements. This leads us directly into Final Fantasy XVI, releasing in 3 weeks. Like I previously said, there will be an upcoming pre-launch event for the game on June 11th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So for all those curious about the upcoming demo coming to the game, all bets are on this event to drop that info. It has been reported by Final Fantasy XVI's producer, Yoshi P, that the game will feature a lengthy demo to drive up interest in the title ahead of its launch. We reported in a previous video, of which you can view here in this card, that the demo will include the prologue chapter of the game, consisting of around 3 hours of content that sets up protagonist Clive Rosefield's motivations throughout the divided and tumultuous world of Valisthea. The game will feature a lot of story and some combat encounters, and the best part about it, players are said to be able to transfer their progress from the demo into the final game should they decide to purchase the title. Although this launch party for the game should give us more information pertaining to this feature. Final Fantasy XVI is set to release on June 22nd this month for the PS5 exclusively, with the PC release to happen within a year or two. And that's not all. There are reports that Square Enix is, quote, slightly panicking about the pre-order numbers for Final Fantasy XVI ahead of its launch. According to esteemed games journalist Imran Khan on a Patreon post, he writes, quote, I had heard recently that Square Enix is panicking slightly over Final Fantasy XVI pre-orders, which are tracking behind Final Fantasy XV, even accounting for the lesser number of launching platforms, end quote. Now, let's all just take this with a heaping grain of salt, because I'm sure all game developers have that fear of their games not selling as much as they potentially hoped for, with the pre-order numbers being there to gauge up to a certain degree of how lucrative a game may be. I do have to say though, for a Final Fantasy title, this game's appeal is certainly not as widespread as something like a Final Fantasy remake or of a classic game. While I believe Final Fantasy XVI is going to be a great game and a game that I will very much enjoy, the fact that this is only available on the PS5 right now certainly limits the game's reach for a brand new Final Fantasy title. Final Fantasy VII Remake had the benefit of being a remake of one of the most beloved games of all time, and it did quite well being on the PS4 a year before PC players were finally able to play it. Given the incredible marketing push Square have done with Final Fantasy XVI, perhaps they were just, I don't know, expecting a bit more? We're also 3 weeks away from release, and with the demo releasing within a matter of days potentially, that could surely drive up pre-order sales for the game if it leaves players with a desire to want to continue past the game's prologue chapter that will be featured in the demo. I'm sure the game will do just fine, but up to Square Enix standards, well, we'll just have to see. Just remember, I am doing a giveaway of Final Fantasy XVI, in which 2 lucky winners will be able to own the game ahead of launch. Remember to participate in the event, linked in the description and in the pinned comment, and watch this video over here talking about Final Fantasy XVI's robust extra content. Remember to stick to the channel for more things Final Fantasy and other hot games in the industry, and I will see you real soon in the next video. Peace!